Thanksgiving morning always brought a kind of quiet ache. Not pain exactly, just a tug of memory, of what used to be. I'd been up since 6, slow roasting the turkey in the community kitchen downstairs. The scent of rosemary and garlic filled the hallways of the Lexington home for seniors, mingling with the faint smell of floor polish and old wood. I brought my own linens this year, ivory with stitched edges, and set them on the long dining table in the shared hall. The nurses smiled when they saw me carrying the china set my mother had handed down. I told them the same thing I say every year. Tradition matters, even if the family doesn't show up on time. This year, though, Mason said that they'd be here. My only son, he'd texted a few days ago, "Mom, we'll be there for dinner. Laura and the boys, too. Can't wait." No exclamation points, but that was just Mason. Even when he was little, he smiled with the corners of his mouth, not his eyes. Still, I believed him. Because you always believe your children, even when they give you every reason not to. I placed the last fork down and adjusted the place cards. 1 for Mason, 1 for his wife Laura, 2 for my grandsons Ryan and Caleb, and 1 for me. My name in blue ink, cursive, a little shakier than it used to be. The nurses would sit at the end. I'd invited them, not formally, just casual. "If you're around after your shifts, there's a plate for you." They'd saved my life last spring when the stroke hit. It wasn't just the physical care, it was the gentle words, the warm hands. Mason had called once while I was in the hospital. Once. Said he was swamped at the firm. I sat down for a moment, letting the warmth from the turkey seep into the room. Outside, the wind rustled through bare trees. Lexington's winters were always early and unforgiving, but inside everything was just as I'd wanted it. Candles lit, cranberry sauce chilling, the silver ladle gleaming, a perfect fragile scene waiting to be filled with laughter, or at least the memory of it. What I didn't know, what I couldn't have guessed, was how quickly that warmth would turn, and how cold a familiar hand could feel when it strikes. They arrived right on time. 3:58 p.m. Mason always did like to be punctual when it made him look good. "Mom," he said as he leaned in for a quick hug, careful not to smudge his pressed shirt. "Smells amazing in here." Laura gave me her usual tight-lipped smile. The boys mumbled greetings and went straight for the soda table I'd set up with glass bottles like I used to buy them when they were younger. They didn't say thank you. I didn't expect them to. I led them to the table. Mason paused, looked around at the candles, the handmade place cards, the ivory napkins I'd ironed by hand the night before. "You really went all out," he said, not quite smiling. "Must have taken you all morning." I just nodded. I'd learned a long time ago not to expect praise from my son. Acknowledgement, maybe. But even that had grown rare. Dinner began like any other. Small talk, bites of stuffing, Laura complimenting the cranberry sauce. But there was something underneath it all, a tightness in Mason's jaw, a flicker of something behind Laura's eyes. Halfway through the meal, as I was refilling water glasses, Mason cleared his throat and pulled a thin manila envelope from his jacket. "I brought something for you to look at," he said, sliding it across the table like we were in a boardroom. "It's nothing urgent, just some paperwork about the house on Sycamore." My hand hesitated over the picture. "The house?" "The old family place," he said. "You know, it's been sitting empty for years. We were thinking it'd make sense to transfer the deed. Less hassle for you down the line." I sat down slowly, eyes on the envelope. "Transfer it to who?" "Well, us," Laura chimed in. "It's just logical. We're nearby, and we can take care of it." I looked between them. "That house was your grandmother's. She raised 4 children there." "I know, Mom," Mason said, his tone shifting to the calm authority he uses with clients. "We just want to simplify things, help you out." Help me out. Funny how that phrase always came with signatures attached. "I'd like to read it first," I said quietly. Mason exhaled through his nose, annoyed but trying to hide it. "Of course, take your time. We just thought it might be easier getting this done before the end of the year." Laura added, "For tax reasons." The turkey sat heavy in my stomach. Something about the way Mason's fingers tapped the table, the way Laura leaned in like a hawk spotting weakness. It all felt rehearsed. And in that moment, I realized this wasn't a family dinner. It was a negotiation, and I was the asset. I thought if I stayed calm, if I kept my voice steady, things wouldn't go where they were clearly heading. I said I'd read it, I repeated, sliding the envelope a little farther from me on the table. I'm not signing anything tonight. Mason's fork paused midair. It's just a formality, Mom. No, it's not, I said, looking him square in the eye. It's a house. My house. The room went quiet. The boys stopped scrolling on their phones. Laura's hand tensed around her wine glass. I noticed the tight white imprint her fingers left behind. You don't trust me? Mason asked, voice low and sharp. I folded my napkin. I trust you to do what's best for yourself. That's different. And just like that, something in him broke. You know what? He snapped, pushing back from the table. His chair scraped the floor, loud and ugly. I come here, I bring my family, I try to help. You came here to take, I said, standing now too, heart thudding but hands steady. You always do. He stepped toward me, fast, too fast. There wasn't a pause, not even a moment to flinch. His hand came across my cheek like a whip, hot, sharp, immediate. The slap echoed louder than the words ever had. My head turned from the force, my breath caught, and then everything stopped. No one spoke. Laura froze, mouth parted. Ryan and Caleb sat still, finally off their phones, finally looking. I brought my hand slowly to my cheek. My skin burned. My ears rang. But I didn't cry. I didn't yell. Instead, I straightened my back, adjusted my sweater, and cleared a glass that had tipped near the gravy boat. I'll clean this up, I said to no one in particular. Mom, Mason started, but the words stumbled and died. Maybe even he realized something had shifted. Maybe not. I picked up the ladle and walked it to the sink. In that walk, just those 5, maybe 6 steps, I felt something inside me close. Not snap, just close. Like a door you've left cracked for years finally clicking shut. Let them sit in their silence. Let them watch. Let them stew in the awkward weight of what he did and what I didn't say, because there was nothing left to say. Nothing they'd hear anyway. Back in my room, the silence felt louder than anything Mason had said or done. I stood in front of the mirror for a long time, examining the outline of his hand on my cheek. Red, puffy, already beginning to swell. I touched it gently, not just because it hurt, but because I needed to believe it really happened. That my son, the boy I once rocked through fevers and taught to tie his shoes, had actually raised his hand to me. And he had. I moved to the nightstand, pulled out the small black case. Inside was the camera I'd hidden on the bookshelf in the dining hall. One of the nurses had helped me set it up a month ago, just in case. After the stroke last spring, something in me changed. I stopped assuming people would do right by me just because they should. I started preparing, quietly, carefully. On my desk sat a stack of documents, all neatly organized in a navy blue folder. The deed to the Sycamore House, the transfer confirmation, the notarized letter naming the recipient, the Central Kentucky Nurses Legacy Fund. 3 weeks ago, I'd signed the house away, not to Mason, but to the very people who held my hand when my body stopped working. The ones who brought me soup when I couldn't hold a spoon, who sat with me through the night because they didn't want me to feel alone. People who didn't call once and say they were too busy. I took a deep breath and opened my laptop, attached the video file, attached a photo of my bruised cheek, and attached the deed transfer for good measure. Then I opened a new email. I kept it short. This is what happened at your associate's Thanksgiving dinner. The footage is real, the bruise is fresh, and the house? No longer his problem. I clicked send. Then I emailed my attorney. Her name was Natalie, a sharp, no-nonsense woman who specialized in elder protection cases. I simply wrote, "Use this if you need it. I'm done being quiet." By the time I closed the laptop, the tears had dried. The shaking in my hands had stopped. For the first time in a very long time, I felt still. Not angry, not afraid, just still. There was power in that, and I had more than enough left to use it. The Monday after Thanksgiving, I stayed in bed a little longer than usual. Not because I was tired. No, my body ached the way it always did after holidays. But my mind felt strangely untangled, like something knotted for years had finally come loose. I sipped my tea slowly, watching the sunlight stretch across the hardwood floors of my little room. The nurses passed by my door as they always did, some peeking in to check on me. A few came in with soft eyes and warmer than usual smiles. They'd heard, of course. Things like that move through buildings faster than any official report ever could. "Do you need anything, Gloria?" one asked gently. "No," I said, smiling just enough. "I've already got what I need." That afternoon, I walked out to the community garden behind the residence. It was mostly bare now. Winter had stripped it of color, but I liked the way the wind moved through the dried vines. Everything looked quiet, but alive in its own stubborn way, like it refused to vanish, even after being stripped down. I sat on the bench and pulled a scarf from my bag. One of the nurses, Janet, the one who always brought extra jelly packets, had asked if I could show her how to knit. She'd said she wanted to make a baby blanket for her niece. I told her I'd teach her next week. Funny, isn't it? My son wanted my house. These women wanted my time, my stories, my hands. One gave more. That evening, I ignored Mason's calls. 32, the phone said. 32 missed calls in 2 days. He'd left voicemails too. I didn't listen to them. Didn't need to. I already knew what they'd sound like. First denial, then excuses, then panic. And maybe, somewhere in there, guilt dressed up like love. I wasn't interested. Instead, I pulled out a note card and wrote a short message to the director of the Nurses Legacy Fund. "Thank you for what you do. I hope this gift makes someone feel seen, the way your nurses made me feel. With warmth and respect, Gloria Harper." I sealed the envelope and laid it on the table by the door. By bedtime, I'd folded 2 more scarves. Each loop, each stitch. Quiet, small, simple. But together, they built something strong, just like I had. 1 year later, almost to the day, I stood in front of the mirror in my new room. Smaller than the old house, but brighter. There was no scent of turkey this time, no linens to press, no place cards to write, and yet I felt fuller than I had in decades. The Lexington home had changed too. They'd built a new wing, funded in part by a large anonymous donation made last winter. Of course, the director knew who the donor was, but no one made a fuss about it. That's how I liked it. Outside in the main hall, the staff had set up a modest Thanksgiving table. Nothing fancy, just roast chicken, mashed potatoes, a pie or 2. The nurses insisted I sit at the head of the table this year. I refused gently. "I've had enough of head tables," I told them, and they laughed like they understood exactly what I meant. Janet brought me a scarf she'd finished, blue and soft with a few dropped stitches. I told her it was perfect. She cried anyway. Halfway through the meal, one of the young nurses stood to say grace. She added a line at the end I wasn't expecting. "And thank you, Lord, for the people who remind us that it's never too late to choose courage over comfort." She glanced at me when she said it. My throat tightened, but I smiled. Later that night, I sat by the window in my room with a cup of cocoa, watching the wind dance through the leafless trees. No one had called. Not Mason, not his wife, not the boys. And for the first time, that didn't hurt. They'd made their choice, and I had made mine. The house on Sycamore was now a retreat center for overworked nurses in rural counties. They sent me a photo last month. 3 women sitting on the porch with coffee mugs and flannel robes, laughing like they didn't know exhaustion. That picture meant more to me than any framed family portrait ever could. The bruise on my cheek had faded long ago, but what stayed with me was the moment I chose silence. Not as surrender, but as strength. The moment I stood up without raising my voice. And now, here I was, still standing, still choosing, still mine. And that was more than enough. Maybe you've lived through something like this, being overlooked, underestimated, or quietly erased by the very people you gave everything to. If you have, I see you. And I'd love to hear your story too. What would you have done in my place? Let me know in the comments. I'll be reading.